Hello, my name is Rasool. I'm a research fellow at Ravensbourne University London, where I explore technology enhanced learning and innovation. Today I'm going to ask the question, can sustained mental health turn invention into innovation? You can find out more details about myself at energydiamond.com and also at linkedin.com/in/Rasool. I'll just share a little bit about myself. I've been a TEDx speaker on how mental diversity and inclusion is critical for the sustained creativity that's needed for innovation. I've worked on many multi-million euro projects, including education projects for delivering mobile education to school children, and also a €3 million project on creating VR simulations for professional training. That included monitoring performance of AR and VR training for International Space Station astronauts. I've also contributed to the €1 million funded research program CREAM, which looked at creating software and processes to predict the emerging futures in the European creative sectors of art, architecture, design, video gaming, media broadcasting and e-publishing. I've been awarded £10,000 from the EU in conjunction with Goldsmiths and Kingston University to create the collaboration cycle, which is a model and practice for effective collaboration that fosters the kinds of creativity that specifically lead to innovation amongst creative industry professionals. In 2018, I worked with other business partners and competed with 50 global entrepreneurial startups to actually win the first prize of a competition run by the fashion retailer Farfetch. And more recently, in the last year or two, I've been the curriculum designer for the undergraduate and postgraduate courses in augmented reality and virtual reality, being developed for a London Mayor's project to upskill people in the East End and also upskill people across European Union universities. A few years back, in relationship to one of the things that we're going to be talking about today, which is mental health and mental coherence, I helped design and run a trial in the UK National Health Service, a mental health hospital in South Tottenham in London, and I used the tools from my company Energy Diamond to track mental health and also track patient mental health and provide therapy recommendations to establish effectiveness of a mental health program. And later that set of results was presented at the Future of Health conference in central London, and you can get the results and view the outcomes at the address that you see there, energydiamond.com/FOH poster.pdf. The tools that I've worked on to help people with their mental health and get their mental processes to become more coherent for sustained creativity of the kind that leads to innovation has been tested with teams at academic publishers Elsevier, also with the national directors as part of a rebranding conference for Unilever, and also with students at Ravensbourne University. It's also been used to help mentor women entrepreneurs across the world to create new kind of responses to global challenges, and that's been done over the last 10 years. I'm going to just mention some of the projects that I've worked on that relate to developing innovation through sustained forms of collaborative creativity. One of the first projects I worked on when I started working at Ravensbourne University back in 2015 was to help out with a project that kind of been stalled. It was a €1 million project to help predict the future of the creative sectors and maybe highlight where research money and funding should be directed. It stalled because opinions were gathered from lots of experts around the world, but nobody had found a way to turn those opinions into quantifiable predictions about the future and where those industries should be focusing their research dollars. So I was brought in and I used my tools that previously been used to help people get coherence with their purpose and their priorities, and I extended it to get a sense of coherence and purpose for the respective industries that we were looking to see the futures of. The result was that the project, which had previously been stalled halfway through because the opinions of the experts had not been turned into quantifiable predictions, was allowed to be unsuspended because the results proved to be accurate and they proved to also be directly relevant for the relevant industry sectors. So as a consequence of that success, it led to the European Union having more confidence in being able to apply similar technologies to improve performance in other industries. And that led to the winning of another huge round of funding to improve performance in the industries of aerospace, in medicine, and also in the space industry. And that was the WeKit project. The WeKit project was a €3 million project running over 3 years to look at how latest technologies such as holographic mixed reality forms of training could be used to train ultrasound specialists, also design training for improving the performance of astronauts that work on the International Space Station and that were being trained for a future manned Mars mission, as well as air ambulance crews and engineers that worked in the Arctic Circle. And this was a very successful program, and as a result it received one of the highest levels of commendation with regards to the outputs and results that were achieved at the end of the program. And the results were presented at the International Astronautics Congress in America in 2019 in Washington, on the same stage as Jeff Bezos talking about his space programs. So this was a wonderful achievement of working with people's new kinds of thinking, new techniques and new technologies, all for channeling into very specific kinds of innovation that helped improve performance of people in the workplace. The far-fetched competition that I ended up winning along with my colleagues, competing against 50 other global entrepreneurial teams, led to the development of new technologies that could scan people's body shape and match it to a garment of the right fit and size. The result being that there was less chance of those garments being returned and possibly even contributing to landfill as well, reducing the overall carbon footprint of this particular sector in fashion. In 2019, it was the 500th anniversary of Leonardo da Vinci's death, and I was asked to work with Birkbeck College and Victoria and Albert Museum, as well as the Galileo Museum in Florence, Italy, to look at some designs that Leonardo da Vinci had for perpetual motion machines and try and simulate them in virtual reality or mixed reality, holographic reality, as well as do an exhibition in 3D print and produce an augmented reality application. So it's the first time in history that Leonardo da Vinci's designs were seen in the real world, either in augmented reality or virtual reality form. And it was a real privilege for me to be the very first person to see these designs prior to them going out into the exhibition area of the Victoria and Albert Museum. Across the projects and various experiences I've had to do with innovation over the years, there's one principle that's emerged from the various outcomes of those projects, and that is that invention made valuable becomes innovation. So how does a creative idea evolve into an invention that has enough value that people consider it valuable enough to buy into or adopt? How does invention become innovation? Well, if we look at invention, you'll find that when it has some kind of value or values made to be generated from it, then it's at that point that it becomes innovation. But in order for invention to happen in the first place, there has to be some kind of creativity to lead that invention coming into existence. And that is only going to happen not through fits and starts of creativity typically. It's going to happen through a sustained period of creativity. That's what feeds into the invention first being formed or born. But that creativity cannot be sustained unless people are able to collaborate in their creative process without any kind of blocks. So if someone's getting a creative block, they get a writer's block, or there's some kind of other kind of block that's preventing them from being creative, and that's happening because there's a failure in collaboration, either in the innovator being able to work with themselves, or because they're getting in their own way in some kind of way, or they're failing to collaborate with the people around them in a kind of sustained fashion, then there will be an issue with creativity stalling. And if the creativity stalls and it's not sustained, then the invention is not likely to be fully formed, let alone have any value that can be considered an innovation. So in order for those blocks not to happen, in order for people to be able to continue to self-collaborate and be able to sustain their creativity, it's really important that they don't get in their own way. And that's best going to be achieved if they can somehow sustain an ongoing mental coherence in the way that they think about things and the way that they imagine things. Now, providing they get that mental coherence and it's able to be sustained, they'll be able to collaborate with themselves and others in a sustained way, and that'll lead to creativity being sustained long enough for invention to emerge and value to come out of that and create something that's a worthwhile innovation for the industry or for society or for the economy. But this isn't a one-way street, it's actually a cycle, and you'll find that innovations, typically if they're good ones, they'll actually contribute to further improved mental coherence. So this is a virtuous circle, and it begins with people being able to stay having coherent states of mind and being able to use that as a basis for ongoing collaboration with other people, as well as just simply being able to get on with themselves and use that to keep creativity sustained long enough for invention to emerge in a way that has some kind of real value that can be considered innovation, something that's valuable enough to make a difference to society, to the economy, or to an industry. What are we actually talking about, though, when we talk about mental coherence of the kind that leads people to collaborate in sustained ways and generate sustained creativity of the kind that leads to invention emerging? Well, it's fundamentally based on a person being able to sustain their flow of thinking and also emotional support and resilience for that thinking. In addition to that, it helps if what they're working on is actually aligned to a specific kind of outcome or intention, and typically that intention to create something or innovate is linked to some kind of value. And what I mean by value here is a person's values or principles or morals or some kind of code of conduct that they want to align to, perhaps ethically. So it's a values-based intention that they align to, and they try and sustain that alignment over time. Now, in addition to the sustained flow of intellectual and emotional effort and a sustained alignment to a value-based intention, there also needs to be support coming from sources that will help sustain what works. It's also a requirement that things should be able to change when they need to. So there needs to be some kind of input which challenges the alignment or challenges the flow of effort to encourage it to generate a more resilient kind of creativity and a more hardy kind of invention. So 3 kinds of help are normally needed to sustain the alignment and to sustain the flow. And that is found in what's called 3 social or creative vitamins: support, challenge, and reflection. Now, providing innovators get the right support each day and they're challenged and they reflect appropriately, then they'll be able to sustain that alignment. They'll be able to sustain that flow of intellectual and emotional effort. Now, if they don't get support, challenge, or reflection for a day, it's not a big deal. But if they haven't had support for weeks and nobody's challenged them for months, or they've not stopped to pause and reflect on what they're doing over a long period of time, then the likelihood is that somewhere along that timeline, the alignment is going to break and it's not going to be sustained. and the flow and the momentum of the intellectual and emotional effort that's going into being creative is going to get interrupted. So sustained creativity is going to be interrupted. And of course, if the creativity isn't being sustained, you're not necessarily likely to have invention emerge that's of any value or any kind of innovational use. Now, if you want really significant innovation that causes a major disruption of a positive kind to industry, to society, to an economy, if you want really epic innovation, then typically it's going to involve some kind of paradigm shift, especially in how people bring about coherence in their thinking and also their alignment to the right kind of intentions. And in order to cause a paradigm shift, there are three kind of key drivers to do that. There needs to be a shift in mindset. There needs to be a shift in the corresponding techniques that people practice from that mindset. And lastly, the technologies that scale up the innovation techniques and processes and thinking, they need to be able to come in and be able to not just scale up the process of the innovation, but also to actually refine it. And if it's done right, then the technologies that are developed at the end of this should hopefully lead to further refinement in the mindsets that people started with to do with the innovation. So this is a cycle, it's a cyclical process, and it allows creative ideas to move through an almost alchemical mental coherence process that goes towards invention and then ultimately innovation. Now, of the mindsets that typically trigger paradigm shifts in invention, innovation, and creativity, there are two main ones that most people will typically work with. The first one is one that's very much driven by values and focuses very much on converting those values into valuables of some kind. So it's a values to valuable mindset. A few years ago, I was inadvertently entered into a competition for what the best business advice could be in a tweet, and I gave the following offering. Business is about making your values of enough value that they become valuable to others. It's about converting your values into valuables. Now, I didn't know at the time, but I'd just shared this bit of wisdom, thinking I was just taking part in a conversation, but actually I'd taken inadvertently part in a competition for the best business advice in a tweet, and the prize was a Intel Ultrabook laptop worth £1,000. So a couple of seconds of me just reflecting led me to take what I was connected to, namely my own values, and generated enough value that I got a valuable from that. So the very act of me sharing this principle led it to actually manifesting its underlying dynamic in that I end up winning a Intel Ultrabook 1000 Prime laptop. But in addition to this, the startup organisation, Startup Britain, and also Intuit, a software company that does QuickBooks software, they shared the tweet amongst tens of thousands of entrepreneurs as well. So it was a double kind of reward just for sharing a few minutes of reflection with the audience of entrepreneurs that I'd connected into that day. But this is an example of what I just talked about. It's the kind of mindset where people start with a set of values that they want to espouse in some kind of way in their business. They find a way of making them of enough value in their business processes or services or products. And if they do it right, those services or products will actually end up being valuable to others, and people will pay money and buy into them. So this is a mindset which is about converting values into valuables. So the journey is very much from the underlying values or ethical principles that you operate on, and finding ways to turn those internal dynamics into external products and services. So it typically follows the iteration of a product or a service through repeated refinement and prototyping, together with effective user modelling. And as a consequence of that process, something that a person is aligned to internally in terms of their value system, it becomes something external and valuable, and it's something that can have an economic, monetary or financial kind of benefit. The other kind of mindset that contributes to innovation is the mindset that's the reverse of the previous mindset. It focuses on identifying valuables in the world and building systems of values around that. So this is more of an apprenticeship kind of mindset, and apprenticeship is kind of the reverse of what we saw for the business advice, in that it's very much about recognizing what's valuable in the world and seeing how it is of value to you personally, so that you can build your life and its values around it. So it's about converting valuables into values. Now, when you reverse the process, you typically go and search for things in the world that people are finding valuable, and you build a business around that, and hopefully, if you do it right, eventually you build a set of values around that in terms of how you live your life. So that's very much an apprenticeship kind of mindset. So the mindset, whether you're converting values into valuables or valuables into values, is what drives the mental coherence. And if it's sustained, then it'll lead to people collaborating. And if that's sustained, then creativity will be an outcome of that. And if the creativity is sustained for long enough, the momentum of that will eventually yield some kind of invention. And if that invention is worked with using the right kind of support and challenge and reflection, the right kind of vitamins, then the result will be that value will be generated from that invention, and it will become an innovation. And hopefully it will lead to another shift in mindset in the world, maybe a shift in people's values or what people consider to be valuable. So what people have coherence around those things ends up being shifted. But the thing to recognise about this is that the process of converting an invention into an innovation is typically about trying to find a way of showing its value or adding something to it that makes it of value enough for it to become valuable and a valuable innovation. There are lots of inventions out there that people have created, but people just don't see the value in them, and as a result they're not really considered an innovation. But for the people who know how to take an invention and demonstrate its value to such a degree that people consider it valuable, those inventions actually get adopted and are seen as genuine innovations. And that leads to change in how people think about things. It leads to a change in people's mindsets. The main takeaway from this process is to recognise that an innovator or design team can't sustain their creativity if they suffer from creative or mental blocks. And typically that happens because they get in their own way. They fail to self-collaborate. But self-collaboration actually arises from mental coherence and mental health and mental resilience. So it's kind of an indication that maybe self-collaboration and mental health, mental coherence, mental resilience, these things must be at the root of innovation. So if self-collaboration and collaboration with others is really important for sustaining creativity so that it has enough momentum to yield an innovation, then we have to ask the question, is literacy in collaboration, especially self-collaboration, a critical skill for turning invention into innovation? Is it even more important than other literacies of reading, writing and arithmetic in helping developing young innovators? Well, if you think about it, someone can not learn to read or write or do arithmetic, but if they do have collaboration skills, they can work with other people to get those things done that require reading, writing and arithmetic. So young people who are literate in collaboration, regardless of how they do in education, there's always a chance that they're going to succeed in life. And those people who are able to read, write and do arithmetic, but are illiterate in how to collaborate, how to self-collaborate, especially how to get on with themselves and not get in their own way, regardless of their education, it's going to be pretty inevitable that later on in life, because of their inability to get on with themselves and others, they're probably going to end up failing in life. So collaboration literacy, especially self-collaboration literacy, is really, really important and critical for developing creativity that's going to be sustained long enough for it to yield innovation and also the invention that underpins it. Now, one of the things that can help with this is one of the tools that were created as a result of an EU project I did to look at collaboration in the creative sectors, and that's the collaboration cycle. And collaboration cycle is something that can help people who are being creative or focusing on invention or innovation to keep up the momentum that is behind sustaining their creativity, so that momentum is significant enough to actually yield invention and generate value of the kind that makes it a real, genuine innovation. Now, it's really important that people who work with innovation are spending time dealing with collaboration illiteracy, and in doing so, they're going to foster self-collaboration, and that's the kind of basic foundational element to sustained creativity. People who self-collaborate aren't going to get in their own way, they're not going to suffer from creative blocks so much, and as a consequence they're more likely to sustain the kind of creativity that's going to generate invention and innovation. Now, the tool that was created for this, the collaboration cycle, it's actually a compass for collaboration practice, and it connects people into committed collaboration that generates sustained creativity and innovation. It identifies sources of creative blocks and obstacles to team working, and gains in learning within creative collaboration often focus on whether there was a clockwise movement around the cycle, going from connecting to people, having conversations and cooperating with them, contributing to one another and committing to collaborating to create things together and ultimately communicate that out to other people. And providing this clockwise motion is followed, then the momentum is built up for sustained creativity and ultimately invention and innovation. So it turns out that this cycle is something that can be worked with, and it can be gone around many times and be completed by individuals and teams as well as organisations and communities. And the mental coherence is something that cultivates a healthy connection at the beginning of this cycle. Without mental coherence and that healthy connection, you don't really get the momentum to go round the cycle and have conversations or generate commitments and collaborate together to create things that can be communicated out to a wider audience. So mental coherence is absolutely the foundation of that initial connection that seeds collaboration, and is something that can also generate very clear values-driven motivations. It's a connection that is really the seed for virtuous kind of self-collaboration cycle of the kind that drives the momentum of creativity and enables it to be sustained. So let's just summarise this, and I'll give you some tools and examples of how mental coherence can actually be worked with practically in order for creativity to be sustained and generate innovation. So remember that invention, once it's had its value generated, associated with it and been made to be seen and explicit, that's when it becomes an innovation. But invention can only be fostered through sustained creativity that comes from sustained collaboration, especially self-collaboration, where a person doesn't get in their own way and knows how to get on with themselves. But that collaboration itself can't happen if a person is mentally incoherent, or the conversation and thinking that they're having with other people is incoherent, or it's not being sustained. But when it is, it makes things go around the cycle, and it hopefully will lead to innovations that further lead to shifts in advancement in mental coherence. And the result is this virtuous kind of cycle that starts from mental coherence, sustains collaboration, and sustains creativity to enough momentum to turn inventions into things that are of real value and genuine innovation that can serve industry, society, and economies. So, how do we actually work with mental coherence in a practical way? How do we cultivate that flow of intellectual and emotional effort and sustain that alignment around a values-based intention and get all the support, challenge, and reflection we need to really refine that process of creativity into some kind of invention or innovation? Well, what's really important about mental coherence is mental diversity and inclusion. And that's very much focused on understanding that our thought processes, our perceptions, our imagination at any given time, they have a kind of centre of gravity to them. And if we can just support that centre of gravity, it will minimise the use of energy and minimise wasted energy. And if you look at an aeroplane, or you look at a dancer, or look at someone who's running or doing martial arts, they all do their movements through their centre of gravity if they are going to do things gracefully. If you try and move something from a point which is not through the centre of gravity, then you're typically going to create turbulence, you can create instability, and there's going to be a lack of grace in the movement of that person if they're doing a dance, or they're running, or they're in a fighting situation, for example. So one of the principles of mental coherence is that energy is invested in the centre of gravity of your thoughts, or your perceptions, or your ideas, or your imagination. Now, the other thing that's really important is not just where the centre of gravity is of your ideas or your thoughts, but the shape of your thoughts, the form of your thoughts is really important. So this is akin to the idea of being streamlined. So if you have something that's streamlined, then energy moves around it and through it with the least kind of turbulence. But if it's not streamlined, then the energy tends to be very disturbed and gets lost, there's a lot of noise, and ultimately it's difficult for there to be coherence in between thoughts, for example, or perceptions, or between ideas. So it's really important to not necessarily follow the path of least resistance through a process of things that work on ideas, but also to maybe look at making sure that whatever you're creating as an idea or invention or innovation, it has the form of least resistance. Now, being the form of least resistance ensures you conserve the most energy, whatever path you follow. Now, working with these two ideas of finding the centre of gravity of your ideas and investing your energy in that, and also making sure your ideas are the form of least kind of unnecessary resistance. These are two of the principles that are necessary for having coherence in the way that people think, and to ensure that creativity is something that comes out of collaborations. But there's another principle that these are intimately linked to, and that is by working through the centre of gravity of your ideas and making sure that they're form of least unnecessary resistance, the consequent of that is that you're going to conserve energy. And in the universe, whatever systems conserve energy the most effectively typically have the most longevity, and they tend to operate with the most kind of optimal use of energy. And the result is that doing those two things actually respects the law of conservation of energy. And that's really important when it comes to allowing innovation or invention to emerge that has real value. So moving through your centre of gravity of your ideas, of your priorities and your purposes that you're working with, and doing so with your ideal form of thinking, the right kind of mindset or path through things, actually conserves the most energy. Now, when your ideas follow the path of least resistance in development and how you learn with them, then you will find that that is best done when your ideas have the form of least resistance. So a hedgehog whether you push it through water or push it through the air, is going to always experience a lot of unnecessary resistance. But an egg, regardless of whether you push it through water or through the air, it will always experience the least amount of resistance for the form that it actually is. So it's really important that when you work on ideas and form ideas, that they are the form of least resistance, in terms of being able to be connected to other ideas, or in terms of the energy that's needed to realize them. So this is very much linked to Simon Sinek's talks on TEDx and TED on focusing on your why. So when you are innovating, it's really important to know why you're doing what you're doing. So designing who you are, or your ideas around why you do what you do, and why you are who you are, or why you're trying to develop a particular idea. It turns every learning action, every creative action, into its form of least resistance. And typically when innovators are working on their ideas and ensuring that the form of least resistance, they try and couple together their talents that they have, the gifts and skills that they've got, together with their ability to be responsible in working with those talents, their duties, if you like, and lastly, joining those up with their kind of passion and desire to get things done. So somewhere in the trinity of these things, innovators work with their talents, their sense of responsibility and ethical approach to things, and their passions. The centre of gravity of those three things, the common nexus point, if you like, of those three things, the innovators will kind of discover their why. And if they know what their why is for their idea, for their invention, then there's a chance that it's going to get to manifest in the real world with the least kind of resistance, and it's also likely to be sustained in its life in a much more effective kind of way. So mental coherence is something that is a consequence of working with ideas in a way that respects the law of conservation of energy, and that comes through working in an innovation process where you know where the centre is of your ideas, and you know what the form of ideas will create the least kind of unnecessary resistance to them being realised. Now, when you find the centre of your ideas and you've found the form of them that creates the least unnecessary resistance to being created, then you'll find that that is your why. That is the raison d'être for that idea to come into the world. And this is typically for an innovator, it's to do with the place in the world where their talents, their passions and responsibilities meet. It's a sweet spot between those things coming. Now, if you want to discover your why on any given day, and you want to identify what will foster a creative kind of mental coherence, then it's really important to try and get a picture of what's going on inside of you in terms of your mental processes. And the best way to do that is to actually take a selfie, and take a selfie of your mind and how it's trying to meet its needs, and also how your mind is trying to help other people meet their needs too. So this typically involves looking at how a person is meeting the 5 key needs in their life, to do with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to things like physical welfare, emotional connection, intellectual capacity and way of thinking, and also self-actualization, or what they're trying to creatively make a difference within the world. But these needs have to be met through very specific emotional intelligence behaviors like self-awareness, self-management and development. So people need to be aware of their needs. They certainly need to be able to meet them practically and manage to do that. And they also need to find new ways of meeting their needs when their current way of meeting needs is not effective. So they need ways to develop their ability to meet their needs. And they need to not just do this for themselves, but also help other people to do these things as well. Now, it's possible to create a questionnaire around all this, and if people score themselves on how well they're meeting their needs for themselves and how well they're helping other people meet their needs, and then take those scores and in a paint by numbers way turn them into colours, it's possible to get a heat map, a kind of radar of that person's overall state of mind, because how they're meeting their needs is in a way a projection of how coherently their mental processes are working with one another. And through this process, it's possible to get a snapshot of those mental processes and get a snapshot of the state of mental coherence that person is working with in that moment. So this snapshot of a person's mind and state of mind, it's called a mental selfie, and it's built from mapping how well a person is meeting their needs through the 6 emotional and social intelligence behaviours to do with awareness, management and development for themselves, as well as working together with others. So when this is done right, this heat map appears that we call a mental selfie, and it's possible to go from that single image and analyse it to see how much coherence that person is working with in their life. So here you can see the scores someone's put down for how well they're meeting their needs for themselves as well as helping others. And you can see the corresponding paint by numbers kind of colour heat map that's actually emerged. And you can see with this person, they're scoring most highly in terms of working with their self-actualization of creativity and purpose when it comes to their needs. And you can see that they're doing most well when it comes to helping other people in terms of their awareness of their needs and how they're experiencing their needs. And you can see generally this person is doing much better helping others than they are helping themselves. And it's possible to analyse these numbers in lots of ways and get lots of additional information about how coherently the person is meeting their needs for a particular purpose that they're actually working on. So, in a nutshell, when those numbers are in a paint by numbers way turned into colours, the lowest scores are going to be coloured red, the highest scores are coloured blue, and the average scores are typically coloured green. And that's basically how you make sense of the selfie. You can see where the person's lower limits are, their upper limits, and where they're doing average. The software behind this can identify the centre of gravity of a person's needs. And if that person wants coherence, they need to put their energy into the centre of gravity of their needs that all their other needs seem to be orbiting around. You can identify the central need for the day, and the software calls that today's priority. And that is where energy should be invested if the person wants to get through their day and use their energy in a coherent way without it being unnecessarily wasted. This is what was done as part of a UK NHS study with self-referred mental health patients to help them prioritise their day each day. And over 12 weeks, it's possible for them to become more coherent in their way of thinking, and as a result experience less stress and anxiety, and not only that, but be in a position where they're conserving energy so well they can actually even help other people in the group. Now it's possible to take these selfie images of each day that reflect the person's overall mental coherence and stitch them together like frames in a film strip and actually run the sequence of images like a movie. And the consequence of this is that a mind movie will be created where the person can actually observe the flow of their own mind and observe how coherently they're going about meeting their needs, especially if they're working on a project to do with innovation or to do something with creativity or collaboration, for example. Now it's possible to combine the movies of individuals together to create an overall group movie, so you can see how a whole team that's working on innovation or collaboration is doing with regards to its collective coherence and whether or not that's serving the innovation process. So this is an example from the study that was done with the mental health group, and shows how the group fared over a period of 12 weeks. And you can see initially they weren't doing well in terms of how they helped themselves, but they were psychologically doing very well, how they helped other people. And generally that seemed to be the case. They seemed to be much better helping other people than they were helping themselves. But when the collaboration was something that was internalised within people, that's when you tend to see an improvement in their psychology and a bit more coherence in that particular behaviour. And this was done over 12 weeks, so it's possible to see how the group started, how it group finished this particular program, and it's possible to use this to actually test the effectiveness of innovation programs, to look at how they were at the beginning, how they were at the end, and keep a track of how well they were developing and what kind of coherence there is in everything they're doing. In fact, these white streaks and spots that you're seeing here, these are telltale signs of coherence in this group and sustained effective habits and creativity in what they're actually doing. So it's really valuable to have this kind of tool to keep track of coherence and keep track of the sustained creativity that's coming out of it, and providing this is kept up, then it gives a higher probability that some kind of invention is going to emerge from this process that's of value and is of the kind of innovation that's really going to be of service to society or industry or the economy. Now, the other thing I said that was important was to be able to get the right support, challenge and reflection from people and various resources. And the technology from Energy Diamond can actually identify whether two people can actually support each other by looking about their selfies and seeing whether there's coherence between them. And it's possible that if there is, then those two people will be able to support each other. If there is a difference in coherence, and that they're opposite to each other, one person's got strengths or the other one's got weaknesses, it turns out those people are really good at challenging each other and stretching one another, and they can provide strengths where the other person's got weaknesses, for example. And third but not least is the opportunity to be connected to people who are a mix of similar and opposite qualities, and it turns out they're really good for being sounding boards and offering reflection. And these three kinds of dynamics or relationships between people and teams are critical in order for creativity to be something that's diverse and is able to be sustained long enough for innovation to actually emerge. So I just want to summarise that it is possible that invention can become innovation to sustain mental health of the kind that is arising from mental coherence. And if that mental coherence is something that's based on people getting the right support, challenge and reflection at the right times, and that can certainly be something that's cultivated with the right kind of tools, such as those that Energy Diamond have created and have been testing, it's possible to not just create innovation within people and between them, it's even possible for organisations to actually create innovations between them in collaborations and consortiums. So there's huge possibilities in ensuring that organisations have functions that cultivate mental coherence of the kind that leads to sustained collaboration and ultimately has the momentum to fuel sustained creativity that can generate the kind of invention that has enough value for it to be a real innovation and be of service to society, to industry sectors, as well as the economy of a whole nation. Thank you very much.